idea of the Innovation Campus in Saldanha Bay has been brewing in our minds for years, and our passion to bring it to life remains unwavering. Our dream is that the Saldanha Bay Innovation Campus is a meeting of hearts and of minds, and collectively creating a better future for the local energy and maritime sectors. Our hope is that it evokes a fresh sense of possibility and inspires us to push beyond our perceived boundaries into the art of the impossible.
Welcome everybody to episode 7 of the Saldanha Bay Industrial Development Zone Innovation Campus podcast series. And the objective of these podcasts is to celebrate the innovation that occurs within the energy and marine sector in the Western Cape. And I'd like to thank you very much for tuning in and remind you listeners, please to like, follow, engage, and share the podcast as broadly as you can. I'm Vanessa Davidson, Special Projects Manager with Saldanha Bay Industrial Development Zone and representing the very exciting Innovation Campus, which is one of our projects within the IDZ. And thank you for tuning in. And today we're welcoming Keith Govender of Anchora Enterprises. And a very warm welcome to you, Keith. And thank you for joining us. Perhaps I could hand over to you to tell the listeners a little bit more about yourself.
Thank you, Vanessa. It's an honor and a privilege to be here and to speak to the audience as well. Just a little bit about myself. I was born in Durban and raised in Durban as well. And my career started in the building industry. And then I moved across to the South African Navy, where I started as a seaman and worked my way up through the ranks to become an officer. I left as a lieutenant, and I've served on various ships in the South African Navy, from strike craft to minesweepers to frigates. And then I headed up the Fisheries Patrol Fleet for the Department of Environmental Affairs and Tourism at the time. And thereafter, I joined Nautique as the Chief Services and Support Officer, and then was promoted to Chief Executive Officer of Nautique South Africa. I spent some time there and then decided it was time to try my hand at my own business. And that's when I started Anchora Enterprises in 2016. And I haven't looked back since.
That's wonderful. Thank you very much, Keith. So for our listeners today, the topic of discussion for this podcast is to celebrate the innovative developments that are taking place in our local energy and maritime sectors and looking at how those can be applied to adjacent industries. So really looking at innovation throughout the supply chain. And Keith, I know that you're extremely well integrated into that supply chain at all sorts of levels. So really look forward to hearing your thoughts. And why we're doing this is that the Western Cape and South Africa have a significant wealth of knowledge. And we really have a dynamic and robust innovation ecosystem. As South Africans, we're all driven for solutions. And that's really why we want to explore the topic of innovation today. And also to ensure that these technologies are known to the broader industry. We often find that the maritime sector is not as well understood as other sectors. And by showcasing it and talking about it today on this podcast, we want to look at how we achieve that full potential in South Africa. And this showcase series is a mechanism for the Innovation Campus to raise awareness about research, development, and innovation occurring locally and to highlight its applications and functions. So to kick off our discussion today, Keith, can I ask you, what is your definition of innovation?
Thank you for the question, Vanessa. Well, basically, I see it as a process or a system of changing processes to make things better within one's company. And by doing so, you basically getting your team involved to suggest new ideas, and you yourself, as the owner of the company, put your ideas forward and together come up with a brilliant solution that's going to make your company work and bring everyone on board, basically, to make those systems work. You know, with the whole trying time of COVID as well, for example, we've had to innovate in various ways to look at our business model and see how best to make the business work. So to me, it's about looking at processes and developing new and better processes within your company.
Right, super. And would you mind telling the listeners about your journey? You have already shared with us your sort of career trajectory, but perhaps to unpack that a little bit more and to ask you what you've learned along the way within the context of innovation, and as you say, the drive to improve systems and to generate solutions collectively, and what the lessons are that you've learned that have assisted you in that process.
One of the biggest lessons I've learned over time is that you cannot rely on yourself to try and implement new things. You've got to work with your team to do so. And with the various, as you mentioned, my career trajectory, I've always worked with a team, from the days of the Navy to my time at environmental affairs and tourism, and then into the ranks of Nautic as well. You cannot work as an individual. You've got to work as a team in order to make things move forward properly and have a streamlined system. So, the biggest thing I've learned as well is that you sometimes get managers out there that are not interested in listening to ideas of anyone else and just want to implement their own things. And then that's a recipe for disaster, especially in the maritime industry. You could have your most junior person in the company would have a brilliant idea as to how things should be done. But sometimes, senior managers frown at the junior's idea, whereas that idea could actually push the company forward. So I hope I've answered your question, Vanessa.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, really, I like the idea of, as you say, having junior ideas, and that it's not this sort of autocratic top-down environment that an innovative environment really needs an interactive breeding ground in order for innovation to be nurtured. Just on to my next question is, which you've partially answered, but how do you apply an innovative mindset to running Anchora Enterprises?
Anchora Enterprises is actually a company that's evolving almost daily, especially with our future projects that's on the cards. And when I look at my team as well, I've realized as a business owner that I do have skills and good skills, but I don't have all the skills. So I cannot rely on myself to make a decision on how to fix a radar. That's not my job. So I've got to rely on the team that has the strengths within the company to do that. Anchora Enterprises is kind of a family environment, if I could put it that way, where everybody will lean on one another for assistance. And basically, if we find that we are weak in one area, then the rest of the team jump in to build up that area as well. What I've also realized is that if the team is, taking on a new project, there's a lot of excitement as well, and that drives me more to grow my company. Is bringing on new projects on board and looking at new ways of exciting the team itself, because that flourishes within the company, and that's what causes the company to grow, because there's this drive from everyone within the team to push forward.
Yeah, that's really interesting, because I think possibly traditionally the maritime sector has always been viewed as fairly conservative in the way that they operate. So it's really refreshing to hear about the sort of the daily evolution of your company, and we're really excited to have your company and that mindset joining us in the IDZ as one of our tenants. I wanted to just touching, you touched on the point about fixing a radar, and that's that your team does that. And I was just reflecting on the evergreen blockage in April this year, which cost us about 12% of the world's global trade, which equated to about $9 billion a day. Have you any thoughts about how the evergreen actually found themselves in that predicament, considering that Anchora offers NavCom and vessel management services?
Well, prior to the outcome of the final investigation, there was a lot of speculation. I mean, it could have been that the radar was 180 degrees out. They could have had an engine failure or engines failing. It could have been any form of error on board. It could be that the GPS was not synced properly with the satellites. But the end result, from what I gather, it was a pilot error. that was on board. But you're right, as to do NAVCOM, you've got specialized people that are doing this, people that have been trained to do that. And what people don't realize is with NAVCOM, you have your OEM equipment, your original equipment, manufacturer equipment, and our teams are trained on these specific types of equipment. For example, Anchora Enterprises is the sales and services representative for Furuno in Angola and Mozambique as it stands. But in South Africa, you've got Radio Holland, who's the OEM representative. So there again, in South Africa, we can service, whereas Radio Holland can sell and service, just as an idea. But coming back to the Evergreen, that was I think the pilots on board must have had a heart attack on board when that happened. And I assume the captain as well on board, because he's ultimately responsible for safety of the vessel. So and you're right, it impacted the rest of the world in a big way.
It certainly did, and just shows us how reliant we are on our regular shipping in our global supply chain. Just focus back again on Anchora Enterprises again, Keith. Are there any new and exciting developments for Anchora? I mean, you said it changes daily, but anything specific you'd like to share with the listeners?
No, thank you for that question, Vanessa. It's actually a very good one. We're proud as Anchora Enterprises to say that we've been engaging the Saldanha Bay IDZ on various projects within the Saldanha Bay IDZ. We've already been allocated land within the SBIDZ, and we have 4 very large projects that will be taking place within the IDZ itself. Our funding has been approved. We've already started working with the Saldanha Bay IDZ planning team as well to look at the exact size of land that we need. And going forward, I will be making a much more formal announcement as to what the actual projects are. But the one that's definitely going to happen very soon, and which we are in the process of, is a shipbuilding facility within the Saldanha Bay IDZ itself.
It'll be fantastic. And I'm thinking about shipbuilding. There's a perception that in the Western Cape, because we're surrounded by the rough Atlantic Ocean, that we, as a result, build strong vessels and resilient ships. What's your take on our reputation as shipbuilders in the Western Cape?
I think we actually level to the rest of the world in that. Some of the products that come out of South Africa now, whether it be yachting or oil and gas type vessels, or security type vessels, or naval vessels for that matter, I think it stands up to the rest of the world. And we should be proud as a country in knowing that we have that skill set, which is a very rare skill set in this country. And the fact that we can harness that and maintain it is actually a feather in our cap. And but to answer your question, I think we're doing quite well. And I think with our project coming up in Saldanha as well, it's going to bolster the rest of the industry in terms of output of vessels being manufactured here in South Africa.
And I think as well that we actually see a lot of innovation in ship design and shipbuilding processes, particularly in the commercial sector, where we're driven by very particular client requirements. Have you seen that coming through in terms of your engagement with clients around innovative solutions and building processes?
Most definitely, Vanessa. That's definitely happening. Clients are looking for more modern type vessels as well. But sometimes, the client looks for the high end stuff, but then the budget doesn't count, so they have to adjust for that. But definitely, that need to innovate with vessel building and vessel sales as well is definitely there.
And Keith, with you locating a new shipbuilding facility in Saldanha Bay, how do you think that the establishment of your business in the IDZ will impact both the maritime community in Saldanha Bay and also the broader community in the region?
Well, that's a very good question as well, Vanessa. When I looked at this and looked at the planning around it, Saldanha is a place that it's the ideal location for a shipbuilding facility and ship repair facility. The fact that we're putting a shipbuilding facility up there, it's going to bolster the economy of the West Coast in terms of we're going to create a lot of jobs. to start with. That's going to happen. The supply chain, if we could talk about the supply chain process, I mean, the shipbuilding facility would need to be supported by various aspects of supply chain. So either businesses may start moving into the area to support us and other entities, and those businesses then will employ people to work in the area as well. So it has a ripple effect on how things go. I mean, there are other projects as well that's going to invite businesses to move in and start supporting those projects also. When I look at the shipbuilding side, we're going to need good skilled people to work in the facility. I'm looking at focusing my attention on working with young people that are coming out of school and university, in line with project management and engineering, and then also looking at supervisors for the production side of the facility as well. Now, I do understand that not everyone may have all those skills at present, and there are people on the West Coast that do have those skills. But I'm also looking at having skills transfer taking place and not just letting people sit in a position for 20 odd years or 30 odd years and not transferring any skills to youngsters that are coming through. But to answer your question, I think the projects of Anchora Enterprises is going to have a major positive impact on the West Coast.
Great, and I think that the innovation campus is there to support that skills development pipeline that you referred to, Keith, and also to support the skills transfer, be that locally or internationally as well, because I think there's increasing pressure on our ports, I think particularly Durban and Cape Town, in terms of competing demands for different activities within the port. And just wanted to ask you, what you think the competitive advantages are of Saldanha Bay over the other ports. My personal view is that with the expansion of the city of Cape Town and the gentrification of areas like Pardon Island, that shipbuilders are being pushed further out from the city. But just wondered what your thoughts were on that.
When you look at Saldanha, it's such a beautiful port. And there's a lot of room for expansion within the port itself. I know there are stuff underway as well for various things such as container terminals and so on, but it's the ideal location for that. If you look at vessels coming around from West Africa, and generally they go to Cape Town, but Saldanha is another port to visit as well. And if Saldanha can offer the full range of services for passing vessels, it will also be an interesting port for vessels to stop and have services done for them. I mean, if you look at Walvis Bay, for example, there's vessels sitting out there forever waiting to use a floating dock, as an example. So if there's one here in Saldanha, why not come around and do that? And I think shipping companies would be more susceptible to coming to Cape Town in Saldanha than being up in Walvis Bay.
Oh, thank you very much for sharing that, Keith. Perhaps just to draw our podcast to a close today is just to share a few sort of key points that I've noted. And I think what's very exciting is you referred to innovation as a system of change and a continuous process of improvement. And what came across very strongly is that comes about through teamwork and through ideas generation, where junior staff members are encouraged to share solutions and that you work collectively in terms of innovation. That seems to have been a thread that's run throughout your career. And we're extremely excited about the establishment of a shipbuilding facility in the SBIDZ. And in terms of innovation, where the SBIDZ can support you through the Innovation Campus in terms of skills development and vessel design and more modern vessels being built. And perhaps just in conclusion, the last point about Saldanha Bay being an ideal location, and that shipbuilding creates jobs, and it creates jobs at all sorts of levels, from artisanal level right the way up to the engineering and project management that you mentioned. And I think very importantly, by locating in the zone, you create that ripple, as you said, the ripple effect throughout the supply chain that sees us attracting more businesses around the shipbuilding facility in support of that. So thank you very much for sharing those thoughts with us today. And maybe just to hand over to you for any last words before we close.
Thank you, Vanessa. I think as Anchora Enterprises, we're looking forward to the future. and we're looking forward to setting up within the Saldanha Bay IDZ. We've got major projects that are coming into the IDZ itself. I've just spoken about the one project today, and as I mentioned earlier on, I will be making a formal announcement very soon on the remainder of projects that will be coming into the area. We are looking forward to working with the people on the West Coast, and I'm looking forward to supporting the communities there as well. And I also would like to see, the maritime business within the Saldanha Bay area grow to its full potential. On the other hand, I'd also like to say thank you very much for having me on the show today, and I appreciate the opportunity. And to all the listeners, just pray that everyone stays safe, and God bless them and keep them safe during this time of COVID-19.
Thank you very much, Keith. We really appreciate you giving us your time and your insights today on our Innovation Showcase. It's an absolute pleasure having you. And thank you for your thoughts and words. And to our listeners, thank you for tuning in again. Just a reminder to like, share, follow, and engage with the team. The email address there is innovationcampus@sbidz.co.za. So to our listeners, thank you for tuning in. And to Keith, thank you very much for being here. And it's goodbye from us.
If you have any thoughts or questions on this episode or any ideas for future podcasts, please send us an email at innovationcampus@sbidz.co.za. Until next time, let's innovate the blue.